will Washington respond after the loss of Chris Petersen? I say, better than you think. Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert, the best kept secret in all of college football. Today, bringing you our 2020 Washington Huskies college football predictions. As always, make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, and share our videos. And also make sure to check out everything down in the description below for some exclusive content on our website, thegridironexpert.com, and some exclusive content on our social media pages over on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So Washington is coming off a very disappointing 2019 campaign. In a year where many thought they could challenge Oregon for the top spot in the Pac-12 North, the Huskies went just 8-5 and had 4 losses decided by 6 points or less. So it could have been a very, very different season for the Huskies. But then to make matters worse, after the disappointing season, Chris Petersen stepped down after their 38-7 victory over Boise State, which means now that Jimmy Lake is in charge of the Huskies football program, being promoted from defensive coordinator to head coach. And I think that was a fantastic decision by the Huskies administration, and I think that Washington is still a Pac-12 North contender going into 2020. We take a look at their offense here, guys, and that is going to be the key for Washington this season. That's where all their trouble areas are, and that's going to make or break whether they have a pretty successful season in year one under Lake or they have yet another disappointing season. They lose their quarterback in Jacob Eason, a guy that I believe should never have entered the NFL draft. He should have stuck around for one more season. But he tried the NFL, got drafted, he's gone. Salvon Ahmed, the running back, is gone. And 3 of the top 5 pass catchers from 2019 are gone as well. This was an offense that averaged 32 points per game last year, guys, and I can promise you they're not going to hit that mark in 2020. They've got to rely on Jacob Sirmon. They've got to pray that he lives up to the hype, that he can live up to some expectations after throwing just 3 passes in all of 2019. Not many reps last year, but he should be getting the reps this year. He does have a capable running back, though, in Richard Newton, who behind Salvon Ahmed did not get that much attention, but still rushed for nearly 500 yards and 10 touchdowns last year. And then you've got Terrell Bynum leading the wide receivers, the best wide receiver coming back for Washington after racking up 368 yards and just 2 touchdowns in all of last year. So the offense, a lot of questions, guys. You've got a new quarterback. You've got a new running back. You've got new receivers that you've got to build chemistry with a brand new quarterback. So a lot of questions on the offensive side of the ball, but we know the defense is going to be the strength for Washington. That, of course, was Jimmy Lake's forte. That's his area of expertise. And we know the defenses under Washington, under Lake's command, they were great. They were some of the best in the Pac-12 and some of the best in the country. They allowed just 19.4 points per game last year, and now they returned 7 starters on that side of the ball. And I will tell you what, I believe their secondary is going to be very, very strong this year. You've got Elijah Molden. He's at cornerback. He was the leading tackler last year for Washington and also their interception leader. And he's going to be paired with Trent McDuffie and Keith Taylor. So you've got a very solid core in that secondary, guys. And then your linebacking core is led by Joe Tryon, who had 8 sacks last year. So this Washington defense is still going to be relatively strong. And I think it's really going to have to carry this Husky team until their offense can find their feet, find their footing, and try to take off in the Pac-12. We take a look at their schedule, guys, and once again, at the time of this filming, we know that the Pac-12 has canceled non-conference games, but those wins and losses that we have in the non-conference for Washington will be reflected in our final record. We know they've canceled non-conference games. We know they're moving to an all-conference slate that should begin in the middle of September. But as we've done for every Power 5 team, we feel it's only fair to predict every game for the Huskies, despite some being canceled. So we have them starting 3-0 with those non-conference games. The biggest one, of course, was Michigan. The Big Ten also canceling all of their non-conference games. This would have been one of the best games of Week 1. New quarterbacks going at it, Harbaugh versus Lake, and we predicted Washington would have won that game at home. So they're technically 3-0, but technically 0-0, 0-0 when they start the conference game and conference slate against Oregon. And I think that's a horrible, horrible way for Washington to open up the season, guys. You look at this Oregon team. Sure, Washington almost beat them last year at Washington, 35-31. Fell by 4 points to the Ducks, who ultimately won the Pac-12 and won the Rose Bowl. But this is an Oregon team now, guys, that is going to be one of the best in the country. They're an Oregon team that is going to be a college football playoff contender and an Oregon team that's going to have one of the best defenses in the country. And that does not bode well when you have so many questions on offense for Washington. So the game is in Eugene, but I still don't think Washington has any sort of a chance here. It's on the road, top defense in Oregon, a running game led by C.J. Verdell that's going to take the load off of Tyler Shugg until he can find his footing. Oregon will, I think, annihilate Washington at home this season. They then return home to take on Oregon State. We believe Washington picks up a win here. We think they snag a win over the Beavers here. They beat them 19-7 last year on the road. A lot of people thought, with as much as Washington was struggling in 2019, that maybe the Beavers could pull off that upset, and they were unable to do so. Jonathan Smith, to me, is doing a fantastic job with his Beavers squad. They're coming off their best record, 5-7, since 2014. But the thing for Oregon State this year is their offense, kind of like Washington here. Their offense, I think, early on is going to struggle. They're breaking in a new quarterback. They're kind of breaking in some new wide receivers as well. They've got Jamar Jefferson, one of the better running backs within the Pac-12, but I really don't think that's going to be enough to win this game for the Beavers, considering Washington had the 28th ranked rushing defense in the country last year. So in a relatively low-scoring game, keep in mind 26 combined points last year, could see it being relatively similar again this year. I do think Washington gets the job done at home. 1-1 in conference play. We're going to make it 1-2 in conference play. I believe they fall on the road to Utah, a team they lost to by 5 points last year, 33-28. So remember, we said that Washington had 4 losses decided by 6 points or less. And they fell to Utah by 5, and they fell to Oregon by 4. The two teams that met in the Pac-12 championship game, they lost to by a combined 9 points. Both of those were at home for the Huskies. If they had won those, who knows what could have happened? Who knows what would have happened for the Huskies in 2019? Heartbreaking losses. We find them falling again this year to both teams on the road. We know Utah loses a lot. We know they lose Tyler Huntley. We know they lose Zach Moss. We know they lose a lot of starters on defense. Only 2 returning on that side of the ball after having the second-ranked defense in the entire country last year. But Kyle Whittingham's defenses usually reload. They don't rebuild. He usually has a great team coming back on defense every single year. And keep in mind that Utah did land Jake Bentley, the transfer quarterback from South Carolina. So while I do think Utah does take a step back, I still think there's contenders within the Pac-12 South. Washington falls to them on the road, but bounces back with a win at home. Make that a little bit more visible here, with a win against Arizona and Kevin Sumlin. An Arizona team, guys, that with Grant Gunnell at quarterback and his wide receivers could take a step forward offensively, but defensively Arizona was one of the worst in the country. They were 120th in total defense last year. The schedule doesn't do them any favors. If the offense doesn't find consistency, the Wildcats are going to struggle yet again, and this could be the last season for Kevin Sumlin at Arizona. So you look at this, guys. The game is at Washington. Washington does boast a stronger defense than Arizona for sure. And if they're able to shut down that passing game for the Wildcats, they should breeze by Arizona, a team they defeated 51-27 last year. So that's a lot to process, I know. They're 2-2 right now after their first 4 conference games. But if you want to add in those non-conference games, they're 5-2. So if the season had gone on as expected, as scheduled, they would be 5-2 right now, which is a fantastic start for Jimmy Lake. They then go on the road to California. This is another game that I think Washington drops. And again, I think a lot of people are going to criticize this. They'll say, come on, you have them losing too many road games. Washington's toughest games this year are on the road. At Oregon, the favorite in the Pac-12. at Utah, a team that made the Pac-12 championship last year and always plays well at home under Kyle Whittingham. At California, arguably the second best team in the Pac-12 North. And then at USC, I think the favorite for many in the Pac-12 South this season. So that's 4 very difficult road games against 4 of the top teams within the Pac-12 this season. And we've got them dropping this game to California, a team they lost to 20-19 at home last year. So to me, that's enough to give California the win already. Washington, with a better team that they had in 2019 compared to they're going to have now, fell to California at home by 1 point. And California is going to have a better team this year than they had last year as long as Chase Garbers stays healthy at quarterback. That is really the entire key for the Golden Bears this season. If he's healthy, this is an 8 or 9 win team out in Berkeley. So the game is on the road for the Huskies, and a relatively low-scoring game yet again. 2 great defenses going at it. It's Justin Wilcox who owns the edge in this one. California snags a win here, and again, I think they could be the second best team in that North Division. They fall to California. They get revenge over Stanford, guys, a team they fell to by 10 last year, 23-13, which I think caught some people off guard considering Stanford was just 2-3 when they played that game. And while I know David Shaw is going to lead the Cardinal to a bounce-back year, they probably will get to a bowl game. This is not a Stanford team like we've seen in years past, where people tremble in their boots before you face the Cardinal. I like Davis Mills at quarterback. I think the offense takes a major step forward. We know they were hit by so many injuries last year, and if they're healthy, they will improve. But once again, the game is at Washington, and Stanford still has some key pieces to replace and key pieces to figure out, despite returning a lot of starters and despite being fully healthy this season. So Washington defeats the Cardinal, but they drop the game to USC, and I think we kind of foreshadowed that when breaking down the difficult level of these road games. When you look at USC, guys, we know Washington beat them by 14 last year, but that was a different USC team. They were still kind of trying to figure out who they were with a relatively young team that early on in the season. Now USC might be the Pac-12 South champions, might be a 9 or 10 win team had they played non-conference games, might win the Pac-12 South this year as they are led by Graham Harrell as their offensive coordinator, continuing to run the air raid offense led by Keaton Slovis, one of the best QBs in the country, one of the best QBs in the conference, led the 6th ranked passing offense in the country last year. And their defense, I think, takes a major step forward with 10 starters coming back, led by now Todd Orlando as defensive coordinator. This USC team is going to be very, very tough to stop for any defense in the country this season. And while Washington, I think, does own that slight defensive edge, it's USC that owns the major offensive edge and home field advantage. I like the Trojans to get the job done here. And look, every single win that Clay Helton's able to pick up is maybe one step closer to saving his job in 2020. So Washington, they've kind of alternated wins and losses here. Loss, win, loss, win, loss, win, loss. It's just kind of alternating wins and losses here, but they're finally going to string together some consecutive wins, defeating Colorado and Washington State. They defeat Colorado. They lost them by 6 last year on the road. And look, Colorado seemed to have everything figured out. Sure, they went 5-7, didn't even make a bowl game, but they seemed to be heading in the right direction. Mel Tucker was there. He instilled a very solid culture, some discipline, had some talent coming into a Buffaloes program that's only been to 1 bowl game in the past 12 seasons. But then Tucker jumped ship, middle of February, went to Michigan State, left Colorado high and dry. They didn't know what to do. They had to go hire Carl Durrell, who hasn't coached in the Pac-12 since the mid to late 2000s. In Colorado, I think it's just going to be a dumpster fire in 2020. You add in that you got a brand new head coach, you lose your quarterback, you lose your star wide receiver in Laviska Shenault. You add in there that they don't have spring practice due to coronavirus, and Colorado's going to be in for a rough season. The game is at Washington. I think the Huskies take easy care of the Buffaloes. And then at Washington State, look, we know all streaks must come to an end. We know all streaks must come to an end. That's just not going to be this year. The Huskies have won 7 straight Apple Cups over Washington State. They defeated the Cougars 31-13 last year. And maybe this is a battle now between two brand new head coaches, and Jimmy Lake and Nick Rolovich over at Washington State. So maybe Rolovich will have more success against Washington than Mike Leach did. But I just don't see that being the case this year. I think there's a lot more consistency within this Washington team right now. While they're both going to have to deal with a brand new quarterback, Jaden DeLora maybe for Washington State, Jacob Sirmon, of course, for Washington, it is the defense I think is ultimately the deciding factor in this Apple Cup, as it has been over the past few years between Mike Leach and Chris Petersen. And it's Washington, to me, that still owns that defensive edge. So I believe that Jimmy Lake continues that winning streak for Washington. They bump it to 8 straight over their in-state rivals, and they do take down a Cougars team that will flirt with bowl eligibility in year 1 under Nick Rolovich. So having said all of that, Washington, we have going 8-4 in the regular season. Of course, that does include the non-conference games. If you take those out, they are 5-4, and that clinches bowl eligibility regardless, guys. 5-4 within the conference. We know the Pac-12 is going to do a 10-game conference slate. We know this is only 9 games. Washington wins it, they're 6-4. If they lose it, they're 5-5. Regardless, they are 500 or better, and the Huskies will be going bowling in year 1 under Jimmy Lake. If I'm a Huskies fan, all things considered, I am taking that. I am excited about that, and I am pumped to see what Jimmy Lake brings to this program in the years to come. So guys, thank you so much for watching us here at the Gridiron Expert on YouTube. Make sure to continue to like, comment, subscribe, and share our videos. And also check out everything down in the description below for some exclusive content on our website, thegridironexpert.com, and some exclusive content on our social media pages over on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And once again, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time right here on the Gridiron Expert.